I live on the Sussex coast and I work in North London. I like my job and there's nothing comparable locally, so there's a lot of commuting in my working life. This short film will give you a brief flavour of commuting life on Southern Rail in late summer 2016. We start with the longest rail strike since 1968. There's buses that are running. 15 minutes walk away. Brighton and Hove buses are usually well served with real-time information systems, so you can tell where the buses are. But I live far enough out that I'm not in that range. So I do the old school thing of craning my neck and looking for the bus. This is late. Usually it takes about 10 minutes from the house to Brighton. I think almost an hour this morning. It's busy than usual. You see lots of people staying away. I blame them. Don't have a choice today. At least there's a train on the platform. So our working day done. It's 4 o'clock and there are 2 more trains on the way out going south, both of which are delayed. I'm hoping that I can make it back to the coast tonight. Let's see what happens when we get to the station. Broken down trains.
We are sorry that the 15:35 service to
You may be entitled to compensation. Please visit our website for details. Apologise for any inconvenience caused to your journey.
Due to RMT strike action on the Southern Network from Monday the 8th of August to Friday the 11th of August, telephone services are expected to be much busier than usual during this period. Thank you for your attention.
3 hours after I left home, and I'm almost at the office. Surely it shouldn't take this long to get to work. 'It's hard to know exactly who's to blame for this mess. The company blame the unions blame the company, and many passengers blame the government. All while the creaking infrastructure itself is clearly falling apart. British train operating companies run on franchise agreements, where they are largely responsible for running a particular network, and although they have certain requirements to fulfil, generally make their own decisions. Govia Thameslink, which runs the Southern franchise, is different. It runs on a management contract for the Department of Transport, meaning that terms, targets and plans are set out by the DfT, and Govia are just there to implement the changes. If you follow the Southern Fail hashtag far enough on Twitter, you'll find one line of thinking that what's happening on Southern is a test bed for the rest of the country. The experiment being to reduce operating costs by reducing staffing costs. Or to put it another way, fewer staff, which means weaker unions, or even none at all, thus removing further barriers to change. All I know for sure is my own direct experience of travelling with Southern. With 2 hours either way between work and home, that's half a working day just to get to and from the office. All good if you get a seat, time to sleep, read or do some work. However, this year the service has been really sliding. Sometimes there's another hour added on to the travelling day. Often timetable trains are cancelled. Then there's that creaking infrastructure to contend with. Signal failures, sinkholes, electrical fires. Given that the British economy is still so heavily weighted in favour of London and the South East, and that this is supposedly the busiest line in the country, the economy itself must be starting to take a hit from Southern Fail. It's certainly hammering productivity, judging by a look or listen around any carriage. I wonder if anyone's started to calculate the economic impact of this yet. New trains were introduced on the Brighton to Bedford commuter service a couple of months ago. They had some technical teething troubles, but they seem to have settled down now. As this train comes into London, there are far fewer people standing, so the overcapacity issue has clearly been addressed in some ways. However, putting more bums on seats seems to have come at the expense of what makes sitting on a long commuter journey more bearable. Simple features like armrests and fold-down tables have been removed. Space between the seats seems much less than it was before. And if you want an actual table for doing some writing or comfortably using a laptop, these are now only available in first class. And the sockets that were finally introduced for the previous new trains, allowing devices to stay charged between home and office, are all completely absent. When you travel by a budget airline, you put up with these sorts of things. Because the mode of transport is pretty cheap, you only do it once or twice a year, and you're usually going on holiday. This is not how you want to start every working day. So, for those watching who are fortunate enough not to need to do this, what is life like commuting with Southern? I've tried in this film to give a flavour of what it's like for me. It's a long journey anyway, but it's also highly unreliable, mostly uncomfortable, and increasingly very frustrating. No one wants these feelings that this generates to spill over into home or work life. So there's also quite a balancing act between life on and off the trains. What I haven't mentioned is the impact that Southern fail has on physical health or quality time with family, both of which I've been affected by. I've needed medical advice for severe back pain, for example, and I barely see my young daughter during the week. Judging by other passengers' tweets, conversations I've had or overheard in carriages, or news stories I've read, my experience is by no means unique. Thousands, maybe tens of thousands or more other people are in similar situations. When even MPs can't afford to buy a place to live in London, moving closer is not an option. Alternative commuting options don't really exist, so it seems that an awful lot of us are stuck in this monumental struggle just to get to and from work. On the 1st of September, the Transport Secretary announced a £20 million package of measures designed to reinstate decent journeys on Southern lines. The following day, the Go Ahead Group, which co-owns the Southern franchise, announced a 27% rise in profits to almost £100 million. Insult added to injury for long-suffering Southern commuters, who are now seemingly being expected to throw both fares and taxes into an ever-expanding black hole. Passengers have organised strikes at stations, written apps to speed up the delay repay process, and are even crowdfunding for legal action against the Department of Transport. I've made this film to further highlight the passenger experience. But in a market-based economy, something's surely very wrong when customers have to resort to such direct action tactics as these, just to be able to use the service they're already paying a lot for. Most of the Southern staff I've spoken to are just as exasperated as the passengers are, and in many ways it's probably even worse for them. Clearly the whole situation's a huge mess that needs sorting out, with very little current prospect of that happening. My question is, who's going to be bold enough to do what it takes to fix Southern fail? Damned if I know.
This is the tale of Southern Rail, and the trains that failed and failed and failed. These are the passengers lost at the station, dashing twixt platforms post-alteration. Some have gone feral and howl at the moon. They've been lost in an underpass since the 3rd week in June. O Southern Rail, O Southern Rail, how we envy the swift, fast-moving snail. On Platform 3, the commuters await a train that now terminates at Platform 8. There's a ping and a cough and then anticipation before, please check the boards for more misinformation. Our limbs are weak, our faces pale, as we wait in the rain for Southern Rail. There's bands of roving businessmen committing crimes egregious, having gone completely loopy trying to get to Bognor Regis. Oh, who would have thought that they'd yearn for the smells of the 1803 to Tunbridge Wells? We're tea-time Templars in search of the Grail, a moving train on Southern Rail. Here are the tourists, the Gretels, the Hansels, on a Brighton service that's bound to be cancelled. There are trains with wheels and tracks underneath, but nothing, no nothing gets to Haywards Heath. And deep in our hearts how we long to impale the board of directors of Southern Rail. They blame the staff, the sick, the frail, the striking, the missing, those living in jail, the leaves and the snow, the rain and the hail, from the lightest breeze to the strongest gale, the cost of doing business, the Daily Mail, quinoa, chips and curly kale, customer numbers that shift like shale, on and on they wail, blaming inclement weather and Jimmy Nail, and tomorrow you know they'll have the gall to release a timetable with no trains at all. O Southern Rail, O Southern Rail, your trains are gone, your excuses stale, and we wonder out loud as we sit and we wait, if a train that's not coming can also be late.